Welcome to the Yoga Well podcast. Today we're going to talk about Patanjali's Yogasūtra and why it's important and how to understand it as a practitioner. As part of what we're going to do, we'll look at the arc of the ideas as they're presented in each of the chapters so we can understand the flow of what Patanjali is presenting and how it applies to us as a practitioner. Something that I hear all the time is that I don't get it. I practice yoga. I really enjoy it. I can see my life is changing. So I want to read about what is yoga. I pick up a translation of Patanjali's Yogasūtra, and it's not clear to me how that applies to my life. Or I go to a teacher training program, and Patanjali's Yogasūtra is presented as the cessation of mind. But how do I do that if I'm doing asana, if I'm doing pranayama? Not quite clear. And what does this cessation of mind have to do with my life, etc.? Well, spoiler, I think cessation of mind is actually a misnomer. We'll talk about that more in a bit. The one thing that does get presented as part of Patanjali's Yogasūtra is Ashtanga Yoga, the 8 limbs of yoga. And this is, of course, a very important component of what Patanjali is presenting as the path of yoga in life. But it has a role in relationship to the other principles and ideas that are being presented. It's very important to understand that in context so that we don't just make the 8 limbs into some sort of, this is what you do in yoga, and I don't know why. All right, so Patanjali's Yogasūtra is the core text of the Yoga Darshana. Darshanas are philosophical schools in India. There are 6 classical ones, or there are 6 that are considered to be important. Each of the darshanas is explaining what is real. It might seem like kind of a funny thing to do because, isn't my table real, etc.? But yeah, okay. But there's lots of things in life where you might wonder, what is real here? Is this situation really true or not, etc.? The darshana also, all of them, all 6 of them, make explanations about what can we know, what can we really understand. And they also importantly explain suffering. Here's why it's difficult in this life and what to do about it. So, Patanjali's Yogasūtra, as the core text of the Yoga Darshana, is setting out the principles of the path of yoga. You will understand how to live your life in a way that minimizes your suffering and leads to liberation. This is not a liberation that is in some mountain cave or which is divorced from your world. It is being liberated within your life. The ideas that I'm going to be presenting about Patanjali's Yogasūtra here have been taught in a householder lineage. Vini Yoga is a householder lineage. You do not need to reject and leave the world to understand yoga. In fact, we believe you do your best work within the context of the family. Because who else can push your buttons like that? And if you really look at it, most of us, we go to the same places over and over and over again, like the office, the school, home. We see the same people again and again and again. So the whole premise of Patanjali's Yogasūtra is that you can utilize your experiences within your life, the ones that are happening again and again, to completely transform yourself and your experience of the world. And, of course, the implicit idea is that this will be very beneficial for other people as well. Namely, your partner, your kids, your parents, your friends, your colleagues. Please, for their sake, do this practice. Okay, so, but in order to really have a sense of that, it's important to see what are the ideas and understand the overview of the ideas that Patanjali has presented here. So we're going to go chapter by chapter and just see how do the ideas unfold and what do they mean and how do they apply to us. There is a companion volume that goes with this podcast, which is called Understanding Patanjali's Yogasūtra, which is an ebook, which you can download for free. The link is in the show notes. So I'm going to present all this information. And if you'd like to know more about it, you can visit our show notes and download the link. So there's only 4 chapters in Patanjali's Yogasūtra. And each of the chapters has a fairly specific goal. And at the same time, each of the chapters is talking about the same material, but from a slightly different angle. So we can use what is being said in one chapter to really highlight and understand and deepen what is being said in another chapter. Chapter 1 is called Samadhi Pada. Samadhi is a perceptual experience of great depth, so deep that even the awareness that I am perceiving falls away, and therefore our identity is transcended. So, in a lot of ways, samadhi is one of the most important tools in yoga practice. It's not the goal. It's a tool for practice. I'll explain this a little bit later. So, chapter 1 lays out the overview of how we get to samadhi and what happens as a result of this experiences. So it's not that you go to samadhi, flip the switch, bing, liberation, all that SHIT that has been going on in my life, I don't care about it anymore. No, it's not like that. It's that these experiences give us deep insight into who we are, and that allows us to be very authentic and also clear in our living. All right, so chapter 1, the concepts unfold like this. There are 3 main sections. First section is 1 through 22. In the first 22 sutras of Patanjali's Yogasūtra, Patanjali defines yoga. He says, Yogaha chitta vritti nirodha. What this means is, yoga is the restraint of mental activities. Pretty straightforward, except WTF. What does that mean? The restraint of mental activities. Well, there's lots of different interpretations of that. One is cessation. Cessation is not a very helpful interpretation of restraint of mental activities. So the restraint of mental activities means, on a beginning level, that you're able to keep your mind from wandering. In other words, You keep it from getting distracted. There is a restraint of the activities. So if we say the same thing in a positive way, what we're saying is yoga is the directing of the mind towards a chosen focus. In other words, yoga has something to do with sustained attention. At the very highest levels, this restraint of the activities of the mind is so strong that even the sense of I am observing is transcended, like we were talking about just a moment ago with samadhi. So, yogaha, chitta vritti nirodha applies to different practitioners in different ways. We can actually say it applies to the same practitioner at different times in different ways. It's one of the ways that this text is so rich. You read it one time, you come back to it another time, and you get something different out of it. The beginning part of chapter 1, Patanjali defines yoga is sustained attention. The result of sustained attention is tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam, which literally means then the establishing of the seer in own nature, which again is very straightforward, except what does it mean? Then the establishing of the seer in own nature. The own nature of the seer is seeing. So what happens as a result is better seeing, clearer seeing. What is the result of yoga? Clarity. What is the result of sustained attention? What is the result of keeping your mind from wandering? Clarity. Plus, embedded in clarity is this arriving back into yourself. There's a kind of authenticity that happens as a result of this, learning how to be present. If we're not like this, then we tend to project onto the world. The mind has a bunch of previous experiences which it projects onto the world. As a result, we don't perceive what's happening, we perceive what we are projecting onto the world. If I feel unlovable, then even though someone may be telling me, hey, great job, I so appreciate you, I can't really hear that because my mind is projecting onto the situation that I am unlovable. As we develop more presence, as we develop the capacity to truly be here in whatever is happening in our life, the result is we have more openness, more awareness, more clarity about what's actually there. And we learn a tremendous amount about ourselves. Since Patanjali has defined yoga as being primarily about the mind, he now has to describe what is the mind. Numbers 5 through 11 describe this is the mind. It's a functional definition. It's what you can see the mind doing. Perceiving, understanding, imagining, communicating. Sometimes we go in deep sleep, it goes off, and there's a record of what has happened today, yesterday, before, etc. Right? So this first section, Patanjali is defining yoga. Then he's saying the results of yoga, the result of not yoga, and then he defines the mind. After that, he says, here's how you get into a state of yoga. How you get into a state of yoga is you have to make efforts and you have to relinquish. What are the efforts? Tatra stithau yatno abhyasaha. This is 113. The efforts of yoga are the efforts to remain in presence. What is the practice of yoga in a general sense, attempting to have sustained attention, attempting to be more attentive. And then that effort is actually wonderful, but insufficient in and of itself. You also have to be willing to let go and relinquish the things that get in the way of that, either the practices that you do to be more attentive, or the efforts that you make to be more attentive, or things that are blocking the results of being more attentive. Then he goes on and says, this is a pattern which you develop gradually in life. 117. Vitarka, vichara, ananda, asmita, rupa, anugamat, samprajñataha. To enter into a state of yoga is something that you do gradually, and which is like developing a pattern. Finally, faith, conviction, gives you the courage and energy in order to be able to embark on and carry out the efforts needed to create this new pattern. That's the first section of the first chapter. Definition: yoga is sustained attention. Then, the result: clarity, authenticity. Then, defining mind. Then, you have to put in efforts to be attentive and relinquish the things that get in the way of that. Over time, this is a pattern. The second section of chapter 1 is less philosophical. It basically says life is full of difficulties. All kinds of things happen which are super difficult. But the problems in life actually don't stem from the difficulties that happen. They stem from the state of our system, which is the foundation of how we perceive and respond to what is happening. So important. The problem is not actually the problem, because you can't escape problems. They're going to be there all the time. The problem is, what is the way that you are perceiving it? And how are you responding? And what will determine how you are perceiving and responding is your state. If you have equanimity, then you'll be able to feel and respond with authenticity and clarity. If you're out of balance, then your patterning will take over and you'll respond like you always respond. You will head back around Groundhog Day again, right? So this section, the second section of the first chapter, explains the problem in life is not what is happening. The problem in life is our state. And he gives 9 means of recovering equanimity. This last section explains, if you can practice this equanimity, this maintenance of balance, even through all the difficulties, ups, downs, lefts, rights, etc., of life, you'll start to have different experiences within the same old places that you're always going. So you go to work. Well, if you're balanced and your colleague starts in on something, you can actually see that it's your colleague's stuff. It's not really about you. And then you'll be able to respond to that in a different way than getting triggered when they start in on you about blah, 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 blah. And so instead of having that same old conflict going around about the difficulty with, whoever it is that you have difficulty with, you'll see something different and you'll be able to handle it differently. And this will remain in your system. And if that happens enough times, a new pattern will develop. In other words, equanimity and balance form the foundation of a different, new, reorganized relationship with the world and anybody and everybody in it. Children, parents, partners, etc. As you have these new experiences, new meaning within the same old conflict, you have a different outcome. New patterning begins to develop in you, and you slowly become a different person. This is the third part of chapter 1. So chapter 1 gives this whole arc. This is what yoga is about. Yoga is about sustained attention. Sustained attention leads to clarity, and it leads to authenticity. How do you get there? You have to make efforts to be there. And you have to relinquish the stuff that's keeping you from being there. Slowly over time, this develops as a pattern. If you can do this in your real life by returning to equanimity, by returning to balance, etc., then you will transform the world that you are living in, literally. Then we get to chapter 2.